My name's Eleanor Stone. I'm a newspaper writer. I was passing the hotel and somebody told me
Writer?
that...
You mean you write pieces for the paper?
Yes, a reporter for the Denver Star.
They were stunning, iconic, and unforgettable. But behind the glamour, many of Hollywood's most famous actresses were despised by the very people they worked with. From icy attitudes and diva demands to brutal rivalries and behind-the-scenes sabotage, these women made headlines for all the wrong reasons. In the golden age of cinema, the spotlight was fierce, but so was the competition. This isn't just a story about talent. It's about tension, ego, and the dark truths hidden beneath the glitter. These are the 20 most hated actresses of classic Hollywood, and the shocking reasons their co-stars couldn't stand them. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford wasn't just a movie star. She was the movie star. With her dramatic looks, strong jawline, and fierce determination, she clawed her way to the top of Hollywood. But while audiences were in awe, her co-stars often felt nothing but fear. Joan demanded perfection from everyone, and she made it known that she was the one in charge, always. On set, she was infamously hard to work with. Joan didn't just want the spotlight, she owned it. She controlled camera angles, lighting, and even her co-stars' costumes. If another actress looked too good on screen, Joan made sure that didn't happen again. One co-star said, "It was like working with a queen. If you crossed her, you were gone." Her feud with Bette Davis became Hollywood legend. During Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, the tension was so thick, crew members were split into Team Joan and Team Bette. Joan allegedly faked injuries to delay production and even sabotaged scenes to throw Davis off her game. "She didn't act," Bette once said, "she calculated." Even after her death, Joan's legacy carried controversy. Her adopted daughter's memoir, Mommy Dearest, painted her as an abusive, controlling mother. The stories were shocking, but to many in the industry, not surprising. Joan Crawford was brilliant, but behind that glamour was a woman no one dared to cross. If Joan ruled with ice and manipulation, Bette Davis ruled with fire. Where Crawford was cunning, Davis was direct, and if you didn't meet her standards, she let you know. Next up is the woman who refused to play nice, even when the cameras stopped rolling. Bette Davis. Bette Davis had one of the most powerful screen presences in Hollywood history. Her eyes alone could cut through a room, but that same intensity that made her unforgettable on camera made her very hard to work with behind the scenes. She didn't believe in small talk or sugarcoating, and she didn't suffer fools gladly. Bette had no time for incompetence. She famously clashed with directors, especially those she felt didn't understand actors. She'd challenge camera angles, rewrite her own lines, and push back on direction she didn't agree with. One director recalled, she'd argue over every detail, but when the camera rolled, magic. Still, that magic came at a price. Her feuds weren't limited to directors. She often butted heads with other actresses, especially those she considered rivals. Miriam Hopkins, her co-star in Old Acquaintance, was one such enemy. The two women couldn't stand each other. There was real hatred underneath their scenes. Davis didn't deny it. "I don't believe in phony friendships," she once said. But Bette Davis wasn't mean for the sake of it. She was obsessed with doing things right. She held herself to high standards and expected the same from everyone around her. Sadly, that intensity often alienated others. Even those who respected her talent found her exhausting to be around. She wasn't everyone's favorite, but she never pretended to be. While Bette Davis burned bridges by being honest, Marilyn Monroe did it by being inconsistent. She was loved by the world, but on set, it was a different story. Up next is the beautiful legend who caused chaos everywhere she went, even when she didn't mean to. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe lit up every screen she touched. She was iconic. Soft voice, blonde curls, and that dreamy innocence that made the world fall in love. But to her co-stars, Marilyn was a source of constant stress. As her fame grew, so did her anxiety. and her unpredictability. Marilyn struggled with lateness. Sometimes she'd show up hours late. Other days, not at all. Directors tried everything, scheduling her scenes early, rearranging call times, even coaching her through lines line by line. She was like a child, one crew member said. You had to coax her into everything. And yet, when she delivered, it was gold. Her addiction to pills made things worse. Marilyn depended on sleeping aids and anti-anxiety medications to get through the day. That often left her groggy and confused on set. Laurence Olivier, her co-star in The Prince and the Showgirl, famously called her a nightmare to work with. He admired her beauty, but had no patience for her process. Even her fans didn't see the toll behind the scenes. Jane Russell, her co-star in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, was one of the few who defended her. She was fragile, not lazy, she said. But not everyone had Russell's patience. Marilyn's behavior strained productions, and studio heads were divided between firing her and protecting their golden goose. In the end, her magic came with mayhem. While Marilyn's chaos was rooted in fragility, others stirred drama with fire and fury. Next is the actress whose temper made her feared in every room she walked into. Lupe Velez, the woman Hollywood called the Mexican Spitfire. Lupe Velez. Lupe Velez wasn't just passionate, she was explosive. With her fiery temper, sharp tongue, and dazzling beauty, she earned the nickname the Mexican Spitfire. But behind the flirtatious screen persona was an actress known for her outbursts, scandals, and unpredictability. Directors didn't know whether they were getting a star or a storm. On set, Lupe demanded attention, and if she didn't get it, she'd make sure you noticed. She interrupted scenes, insulted co-stars, and even threw props when she got frustrated. Crew members said she'd yell at directors for shooting her bad side, or accuse actresses of trying to steal her spotlight. She walked onto set like it was her stage, one technician recalled, and she owned every inch of it. Off camera, things were even wilder. Her relationship with Gary Cooper was a whirlwind of love, rage, and chaos. She once allegedly chased him with a knife after a fight. Lupe's jealousy wasn't quiet. It was explosive. Her romantic affairs had often turned public, loud and violent. She lived for drama, a friend once said. She didn't care where it happened. But beneath the fire, there was a woman desperate to be taken seriously. Velez hated being reduced to a stereotype. She wanted roles with depth, but Hollywood kept casting her as the loud Latina caricature. That frustration fueled much of her rage, and in the end, her temper overshadowed her talent. Lupe Velez burned bright, but too hot for her own good. If Lupe Velez shouted her pain out loud, the next actress kept hers locked behind a perfect, polished face. Jean Tierney didn't scream or throw tantrums, but the cold distance she brought to every set left her just as isolated. Jean Tierney. Jean Tierney was breathtaking. With piercing eyes and a flawless profile, she looked like a porcelain doll, untouchable and distant. And to many of her co-stars, that's exactly what she was. Tierney wasn't loud or confrontational. She was simply absent, cold, detached. And in a business driven by charm, that made her deeply disliked. She rarely mingled with the cast. During long shoots, she kept to herself, often skipping wrap parties or bonding moments with the crew. Directors found her difficult to read. Emotions didn't show on her face unless the camera was rolling. One actor described her as an empty room with beautiful wallpaper. That haunting silence followed her everywhere. Rumors swirled that Jean saw herself above the rest, that she considered others unworthy of her time. But the truth was more complicated. Tierney was battling deep depression, especially after giving birth to a severely disabled daughter. The child had been born after Jean unknowingly contracted rubella from a fan during a hospital visit. The guilt never left her. She struggled through mental breakdowns, hospitalizations, and even electroshock therapy. But she never let the public see it. On the surface, she remained poised. And that disconnect between her outer beauty and her inner torment confused and alienated those around her. She wasn't cruel, she was wounded. But in Hollywood, where everything rides on relationships, that coldness cost her. While Jean Tierney hid behind silence, the next woman embraced the spotlight and fought anyone who threatened to dim it. Veronica Lake's beauty made her a star. Her behavior made her hated. Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake became famous for her peekaboo hairstyle and sultry screen presence. But as quickly as she rose, she fell. And much of that downfall came from her attitude. On set, she was difficult, dismissive, and as one director put it, she had no interest in being liked, only in being famous. She argued constantly with directors, especially when asked to redo takes. Lake believed she knew what worked, and she refused to budge. Her stubbornness was legendary. On the set of This Gun for Hire, she fought so bitterly with crew members that production nearly shut down. She treated everyone like they worked for her, said a cameraman, not with her. Her most famous co-star, Alan Ladd, refused to work with her again after their fourth film. He said she was cold, moody, and dismissive. Lake often showed up late or intoxicated, further straining relationships. The more successful she became, the more isolated she was. Directors called her a nightmare. Studios started whispering about replacing her. Eventually, the offers stopped coming. Veronica's attitude had burned too many bridges. By the time she was in her 30s, she was working in B movies. By her 40s, she was gone from Hollywood completely. She later admitted she was young, foolish, and full of herself. But by then, it was too late. Veronica Lake's career became a warning. Don't let ego kill your chance to shine. Some actresses pushed others away with ego, some with silence. But the next woman? She did it with raw defiance. Ava Gardner wasn't just fiery. She was feared, and she didn't care what anyone thought. Ava Gardner was one of the most stunning women to ever grace the silver screen. Her deep green eyes, sultry voice, and southern charm made her irresistible to audiences. But to many in Hollywood, Ava was more storm than star. She didn't hide her opinions. She didn't fake pleasantries. And if you crossed her, you'd know it. From the beginning, Ava clashed with the Hollywood system. She hated the press, avoided studio-controlled appearances, and refused to follow the rules of stardom. On set, she was known to speak her mind, no matter who she was talking to. One producer said, "She swore like a sailor and carried herself like a queen." She didn't care about being nice. She cared about being real. Her temper was legendary. If a co-star annoyed her, she'd say it. If a director pushed her, she'd push right back. During the filming of Mogambo, she reportedly screamed at the crew over minor lighting changes. She walked off multiple productions mid-shoot, claiming she wasn't in the mood to act today. And yet, she remained magnetic. Directors kept calling her back, because when Ava did show up, she lit up the screen. Even her romances added fuel to her reputation. Her marriage to Frank Sinatra was chaotic, loud, and tabloid gold. She was known for drinking, cursing, and getting into bar fights. Ava didn't play by anyone's rules, not even her own, said a friend. That independence made her iconic, but impossible to manage. In the end, Ava Gardner was exactly who she wanted to be, even if everyone around her hated it. While Ava was bold and confrontational, the next actress wore sweetness like armor, until it cracked. Debbie Reynolds seemed like the girl next door. But to those who knew her best, she wasn't always the sweetheart America believed she was. Debbie Reynolds. To the public, Debbie Reynolds was pure charm, bright smile, cheerful eyes, and a singing voice that could melt any room. But off-camera, many co-stars described a woman who was far more calculating, fiercely ambitious, and deeply competitive. The girl next door image didn't always match the reality behind the curtain. Reynolds started young and learned quickly how to navigate Hollywood. She knew how to win over the press, how to appear humble, and how to make studios love her. But that control also bled into her working relationships. She allegedly competed with other actresses for screen time and would push back against directors if she felt overshadowed. She had a sweet voice, one co-star said, but there was steel behind it. One of her most infamous fallouts was indirectly tied to her personal life, her marriage to singer Eddie Fisher, and his affair with Elizabeth Taylor. The scandal rocked Hollywood, but insiders whispered that Reynolds used the moment to reframe her image and regain popularity. While the heartbreak was real, many noted how calculated her next moves were. She capitalized on sympathy and never missed a beat professionally. On set, she was reportedly demanding. She expected others to match her work ethic, and if they didn't, she let them know. Supporting actors often found her cold during filming and said she switched personas the moment the cameras rolled. Her bubbly persona? That was for the audience, a director claimed, not the people behind the scenes. Despite the criticism, Reynolds remained a staple in classic Hollywood, respected but not always liked. She knew how to win the public. The crew, not so much. Next comes an actress whose behind-the-scenes behavior turned admiration into alienation. Susan Hayward wasn't a household name like Marilyn or Bet, but on set, she left just as strong an impression, and not always in a good way. Susan Hayward. Susan Hayward had that red-headed fire that made her a powerhouse on screen and a nightmare off it. She was known for her intense performances, steely confidence, deep professionalism. But that same intensity often made her difficult to direct, exhausting to work with, and nearly impossible to please. Hayward didn't tolerate mediocrity. She pushed herself hard and expected everyone around her to match that energy. But when they didn't, she snapped. Directors described her as impatient and perfectionistic, sometimes refusing to shoot a scene if the lighting or blocking wasn't exactly how she wanted it. She had a voice like velvet, one producer said, but her stare could slice through brick. She often clashed with male leads who tried to dominate scenes. Susan didn't play second fiddle, and she wasn't afraid to say so. During the filming of I Want to Live, she reportedly walked off set for hours after arguing with a cinematographer over how her close-ups were being framed. The crew waited and waited. She returned only when she felt respected. Hayward also disliked press tours and fan engagements. She didn't like being handled and refused to fake niceness for magazine interviews. That didn't sit well with studios, who needed her cooperation to promote films. She was a star, one publicist admitted, but she wasn't built for the business side of fame. Still, her talent was undeniable. She won an Oscar and delivered some of the most powerful performances of her time. But while critics cheered, her co-stars often sighed in relief when the cameras stopped rolling. Hayward didn't want to be liked. She wanted to be excellent, and that meant leaving people behind. As we move ahead, the next woman wasn't just difficult. She was controlling. Mae West didn't share the spotlight, rewrite her lines, or tolerate competition. She was the show, and if you didn't like it, she'd make sure you disappeared from it. Mae West. Mae West didn't just perform in Hollywood, she ran her corner of it. With her signature walk, sly wit, and curves that broke rules, she became a larger-than-life symbol of sexual liberation. But behind the innuendos and diamond-studded one-liners was a woman who ruled every set with an iron grip. And for most people around her, it wasn't pleasant. West wrote many of her own films. She often demanded total control over the script, camera angles, and even casting. If another actress threatened to steal the spotlight, even slightly, Mae cut her lines or pushed her off the poster. There was no such thing as a co-star with Mae, one actor recalled, just supporting extras who knew their place. Her most infamous clash came during Myra Breckinridge, where she went head-to-head with Raquel Welch. Mae refused to film scenes directly with her, used body doubles, and even had the lighting adjusted so she looked younger and softer than Welch. Raquel later called her the most selfish actress I've ever worked with. May also refused to rehearse with others. She believed she only needed one take, and often resented being asked for more. Directors couldn't correct her, and studio heads couldn't overrule her. The older she got, the more impossible she became. As one crew member put it, working with May was like entering her kingdom. You either bowed or got out. Despite the tension, Mae West remains an icon. But her legacy comes with a warning. Brilliance and control can only coexist when you remember others are sharing the screen. If Mae West ruled with dominance, the next actress let ambition drive her to extremes. Betty Hutton may have danced and sang her way into stardom, but behind the scenes, her need for control turned sets into battlegrounds. Betty Hutton. Betty Hutton lit up screens with energy, charm, and that contagious laugh. In films like Annie Get Your Gun and The Miracle of Morgan's Creek, she was unstoppable. But while she appeared bubbly on screen, many who worked with her described a completely different person behind the scenes. Intense, controlling, and often combative. Hutton was known for rehearsing obsessively, sometimes reworking her own musical numbers without permission. She didn't just want to shine, she wanted to control everything. That included wardrobe, staging, choreography, and even the lines of her co-stars. You weren't performing with her, one actor said, you were surviving her. She frequently clashed with directors. On more than one occasion, she stormed off set after disagreements over timing or blocking. She also had no patience for retakes, unless she demanded them. One producer noted, when Betty was on, she was brilliant, but when she wasn't, nobody else could function either. Her paranoia made things worse. Betty often believed others were trying to upstage her or sabotage her scenes. She'd confront supporting actresses, accuse crew members of setting her up, and insist on watching playback before letting a scene move on. These habits frustrated studios, and slowly, her once soaring career began to decline. Despite the chaos, her performances were unforgettable. But those who worked with her often walked away exhausted, emotionally bruised, and relieved to move on. Betty Hutton gave everything to the audience, but she took a lot from the people standing beside her. While Betty battled everyone for control, the next actress built a wall of distance so cold it turned admiration into avoidance. Lana Turner was stunning, successful, and perfectly poised, but her co-stars say she froze them out before the cameras even rolled. Lana Turner. Lana Turner was the picture of Hollywood elegance. With her platinum hair, velvet voice, and impeccable style, she defined the golden age of the silver screen. But for many who worked with her, she was more statue than star, distant, cold, and indifferent to anyone she didn't need. Lana didn't do small talk. She rarely mingled with cast or crew, often isolating herself in her dressing room between takes. You got the feeling you weren't worthy of her time, said one supporting actress. Her silence wasn't shy, it was icy. Even directors found her difficult to engage beyond what was absolutely necessary. She had a reputation for being overly image-focused. Lana insisted on approving every camera angle, every costume, every lighting setup. If she didn't look perfect in a shot, she demanded a retake, no matter how it affected her co-stars. One cinematographer said she didn't care about performance, she cared about perfection. Younger actresses often found her intimidating. If someone started gaining attention or applause on set, Lana allegedly asked producers to trim their roles or shift the focus back to her. Rumors even claimed she pressured casting agents to avoid pairing her with actresses who matched her in looks or screen presence. Her career spanned decades, and she remained a respected figure. But behind that success was a legacy of strained relationships. Lana Turner didn't scream or fight. She froze people out. And for many, that was worse. Her beauty was undeniable. Her warmth, however, rarely showed. Next comes the woman who could smile sweetly on screen, but wielded venom behind it. Joan Fontaine didn't raise her voice, but her reputation for backstabbing, rivalry, and silent manipulation made her one of Hollywood's most quietly resented actresses. Joan Fontaine. Joan Fontaine looked like the perfect lady, elegant, soft-spoken, and refined. She had the kind of face that belonged in a Jane Austen novel. But those who worked with her, and especially those who knew her personally, often told a different story. Beneath that graceful charm was a sharp, calculating actress who didn't mind stepping on toes to climb the ladder. Her feud with her sister, Olivia de Havilland, is the most famous sibling rivalry in Hollywood history. They competed for roles, for Oscars, and for respect. When Joan won her Academy Award before Olivia, she bragged about it. When Olivia won hers later, she refused to speak to Joan. And when Joan died, Olivia didn't attend her funeral. The bitterness ran deep, and many say Joan was the one who kept it alive. On set, Joan developed a reputation for gossiping about co-stars and undercutting actresses she felt threatened by. One director said, "She played the innocent on screen, but behind the scenes, she stirred the pot." She reportedly sabotaged rehearsals and made subtle jabs at younger talent, using charm to mask her competitiveness. Joan didn't yell. She didn't make scenes, but she had a way of making people feel small with a single glance or a well-placed comment. Her ability to quietly manipulate a room made her unpopular with co-stars who felt they couldn't trust her. "She smiled in your face," one actress said, "then talked about you to the studio behind your back." She may have played delicate women in distress, but off-camera, Joan Fontaine was far from fragile, and Hollywood never forgot it. While Joan Fontaine played games behind closed doors, Errol Flynn played them out in the open. He wasn't just hated for his behavior, he was feared. Reckless, wild, and completely unfiltered, Flynn turned every set into a party, and every co-star into collateral damage. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was a rogue in every sense of the word. On screen, he was the dashing hero, swashbuckling, fearless, magnetic. Off-screen, he was chaos in human form. While audiences adored his charm, many co-stars dreaded seeing his name on a call sheet, because when Errol showed up, anything could happen, and usually did. He drank heavily, sometimes showing up drunk to set or disappearing for hours at a time. One director said, "You didn't direct Flynn, you just hoped he didn't ruin the day." Actors complained of his lack of professionalism. He often improvised, ignored blocking, or made crude jokes. Mid-scene, throwing everyone off rhythm. But because he brought in money, the studios let it slide for a while. Flynn's behavior wasn't just disruptive, it was disrespectful. Female co-stars accused him of crossing boundaries and being overly flirtatious, even aggressive. Olivia de Havilland, despite their famous on-screen chemistry, reportedly despised working with him. He mocked serious actors, rolled his eyes at rehearsals, and treated film sets like bachelor parties. Yet, there was something tragic about Flynn, too. He lived fast, burned out young, and never truly cared to change. He once said, "I like my whiskey old and my women young." That attitude made him a legend and a liability. Eventually, his wild ways caught up with him, and the roles slowed down. But the stories? They only grew louder. And finally, we come to the man who challenged the very idea of what it meant to be an actor. Marlon Brando didn't destroy sets. He dismantled egos. Loved by audiences, hated by co-stars, Brando rewrote the rules and made enemies along the way. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando was the future of acting in a time that wasn't ready for him. He revolutionized the craft with raw emotion, broken rhythms, and truth that hit like a punch. But for all his brilliance, Brando was a nightmare for those who had to share the screen with him. He didn't follow rules, he broke them to pieces. He mumbled through lines, refused to memorize scripts, and often came to set underprepared. Directors were forced to hide cue cards all over the set so he could stay in the moment. While it looked effortless to the audience, it made life miserable for his castmates. "You never knew what he'd do," said one actor, "or if he'd even show up." Brando also disrespected traditional stars. On the set of Guys and Dolls, he clashed bitterly with Frank Sinatra. Brando's method acting drove Sinatra crazy. Sinatra called him Mumbles. Brando called Sinatra a glorified crooner. The two barely spoke. The tension between them made scenes stiff, cold, and impossible to direct. Even with rising stars, Brando showed little respect. He reportedly dismissed James Dean as a poser and clashed with directors on nearly every project. And yet, he delivered performances so powerful, no one could look away. A streetcar named Desire on the waterfront. The Godfather. He changed the art form forever. But no one walked away from working with Brando saying it was easy. He wasn't interested in being liked. He was interested in being honest. And in doing so, he became the most talented and most infuriating actor Hollywood had ever seen. Old Hollywood was filled with beauty, talent, and timeless performances. But behind the curtain, it was also bursting with jealousy, feuds, and fury. These 20 actresses helped define a cinematic era, but their reputations off-screen were as dramatic as any script they read. For every Oscar, there was an enemy. For every spotlight, a feud. They may be legends today, but back then, they were often loathed more than they were loved. Because in the golden age of film, fame came with a price. And sometimes, the biggest stars cast the darkest shadows.